Hello. Hey there. We are doing something a little unique tonight. I'm putting on a couple hats as Junior's vice president and also a board member of Grit 2, which I tirelessly talk about. It is a nonprofit here in Downers Grove that centers around teen and family mental health and wellness. So we do things like this where we bring speakers in and talk about topics that have to do with kids and mental health. And we thought that this would be a perfect topic of figuring out when you can bring media into the family. And so I'm talking a little bit to the computer here for a second until I switch it over to our slideshow. That's what people are going to be seeing on this end because there's people joining us virtually today that wanted to see the presentation. We do lots of virtual presentations. We do in-person presentations all around mental health. And thank you for our previous sponsorship from Junior Women's that we've gotten that went towards May Mental Health Month and lots of other programming that happens directly in the high schools, middle schools, and the elementary schools year round. So we're kind of shifting to more student-facing work and not as many of these interactions and presentations, but we thought this would be a good opportunity to get lots of FaceTime with adults in the community, and lots of you have kids and lots of you have issues with phones. So we thought, what a perfect topic. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily and Paige here from Ellie Mental Health here in the community and talk about decoding media in the household and devices. So I'm going to turn it over to them and I'm going to sit right here and click for them. So enjoy. Thank you.
Hi, just let us know if you can't hear in the back. I do have a loud mouth, so if you probably can hear me, Paige might be different. I'm Emily Weber. I am the clinical director of Ellie Mental Health. We have a location here in Downers Grove and also in Oak Brook. We serve kids as young as 5 up, and Paige is one of our therapists. This is Paige
Everybody.
Shookman. So today we're talking about decoding the dilemma and when we should allow our children to have phones. Some of them already have phones, how to manage it once they have phones and ongoing. So probably it.
Is anyone waiting on a red sangria? Thank you. Sorry.
So what is the right age for getting your kid a phone?
Well, there is no right age. Each child is very different. What makes them ready is if they're emotionally mature enough, if you feel like you can trust them in the home, and sometimes between the ages of 12 and 14.
Right. That's probably a tough question where we want an actual number, right? But we can't actually give it. I'm sure some of you have different kids or multiple kids, right? And you look at one of your child and they're 10 and they're much more mature than maybe your 14-year-old. So again, that's really what we're looking for. We want to look at the emotional maturity. Can you leave them home responsibly, right? Are they being left by themselves? Do you trust them? Do they have co-occurring issues? Are they suffering from anxiety or separation anxiety? Things like that, which would create a lesser emotional maturity. So if the answer is no, how do I tell my child no when everybody else has one already, right? Sorry, no, you're okay. So how to say no?
And this will get sent to all of you.
Sorry. As a 2-year-old would say no. And I say that, half jokingly, but really if you were to tell your child no, and really the benefit of that is not necessarily just saying no because I said so, but explaining why. And we're going to give you a lot of reasons on those kids who are under the age of 12 that might not be emotionally ready, or even 14, right? Again, when you feel they are ready. So one of the things that when you do say no, we encourage you to be an active listener.
Yep. So active listening is when you're empathic with your child. So say you have a 12-year-old, you don't feel that they're ready. It's not about just saying like, you're not ready, it's not time, but being able to listen to their reasoning and having an empathic response. So even if you know that the answer is no, it's concrete, you're sure of that, being able to say something like, that's really hard. It's hard when your friends all have a phone and you don't. Like, you can talk about it.
Yeah, encouraging that and being empathetic and validating that, right? We understand that, and then talking about some of those other things. But the other thing is to consider other devices. Luckily today we have options like smartwatches. For those younger kids under 12, that is a good introduction to if they're ready or not. You have the ability to contact them, not that I'm gonna tell you to track your child, but track your child. And then they can have accessibility to text messages and phone calls, where the other things like social media, which can have a huge impact on our children, it has a huge impact on us. So our brains are developed, our kids' brains are not. So with doing that, having that smartwatch would be encouraged for those under 12. In the therapeutic community, we would consider that. And then other things like eye touches, that gives you their ability to be able to use them on, Wi-Fi and have some accessibility to communicate with their friends, but in structured environments, right? At home, they can't take it places. They have limited access to social media, right? You can attach that to your iTunes account and have the ability to provide parental controls. So those would be some of the stuff that when everyone is saying yes, these are some options that you could. But now, okay, my kid is ready. So now what, right? My kid's ready. One of the best things we can say is starting out with a kid is having create expectations of that phone usage, right? Having clear and concise expectations. We all do better when our bosses, kids do better when as parents tell clear, concise expectations. When we don't have that, then we behave not knowing what is expected of us. And then we assume, which we all know, assuming makes an ass out of you and me, right? So we want having that clear of what those things are is really important. Yep. Monitoring screen time. Less is more, right? I mean, we're not looking at technology with school. We're looking how to incorporate school into technology, right? And so if you look at that, kids are given at age 6 a Chromebook. They're starting to use it. Their screen time has increased every day during school to much more significant time. So less is more. So every kid is different, right? And having expectations if it's doing their homework and then they can earn it. Positive reinforcements always work better than negative reinforcements. And so having a checklist of these are the things you need to do to earn screen time or time.
Talking about safety. So what are the risks of, even if you don't have social media, there are other things like fraudulent things, scams, texts that can come in. So this is even pre-social media. We'll talk more about that when we get to that slide, but also having a charging location and monitoring and checking phone on a regular basis. But I think we'll have questions about what that really means, right? And what you're monitoring for. And there are programs that can help you with that. But that's like text calls, apps, and then if social media, if they have it. But taking the phone at a certain time when it's in a charging location can be really helpful, just because kids, that's how their brains work, right? So a teenager, they're addicted to that dopamine, so they kind of keep going all night.
So maybe half of you in here are like, my kid already has one, so now what? We haven't set up expectations. How do I manage now? I'll tell you, it's never too late to set expectations, and we should be setting expectations regularly, right? As a kid ages, the same expectation at 10 isn't the same expectation as 14. So having those conversations of what our expectations are of your child is key to having it. And if you have maybe realized you need to set more, stronger boundaries and, expectations, a couple of those things is it's okay to take accountability for that. I wasn't ready for this and I didn't realize the consequences. Taking accountability as a parent to your child is one of the best key, lessons that they can learn. If you can show your child that you can take accountability for a mistake, it shows them that it's okay to make mistakes. And so as parents, I would encourage you to do that. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that it was going to be like this, or how you were going to respond to having a phone or having that free accessibility to social media. Monitoring the phone together. One of the things, it's not, we want you to mirror those behaviors of what you want your kid. So if you're going to sneak and take the phone, that's going to teach them to be sneaky too, right? So if you do it in front of your kids and you talk about it, it allows them to share what's going on. I remember this situation with my sister who took my niece's phone and she got so anxious and she threw up all over the car. My sister's like, whoa, what is in the phone, right? She's thinking the worst. And it was a text message among her friends that one of them snuck out and she was afraid her friend was gonna get in trouble. My sister was like, oh, okay. So that allowed my sister to have that conversation instead of, if she had read it, who knows if my sister would have assumed that my niece snuck out also. So having that like behavior together allows you to have open dialogue, and allows them to share and feel like they can share those things, even if it's scary or they could get in trouble. And we're going to talk about discussing social media and the impact, but if having that conversation with them and why we want to limit it, or why we haven't allowed them to get that app or explore, have an Instagram or have Snapchat, having that conversation instead of just saying no because you're not old enough. Kids want to know reasons why. And so having that conversation, because the safety risks, right? How it impacts our mental health. We don't necessarily understand the impacts, right? And our brain is grown and functional. We didn't realize what we posted. I mean, anyone check their Facebook memories like 12 years ago and you're like, oh, that's cringy. I can't believe I said that every day. So I was an adult at that. I was 28 years old. My brain was fully developed. I didn't realize the consequences 12 years ago that I was going to be mortified that that's still out there, right? We still have a digital footprint on everything we put out there. Kids don't realize that. We're in an instant gratification era, right? Amazon delivers in 2 days. We can look up anything. We know that Suzanne Summers passed away within hours, right? Like all of these things that we know right away creates this instant gratification and feeds into that impulsivity. The stuff that we like, dopamine, right? That's that happiness and spikes of great. TikTok does it the best, right? 3 minutes, we get rushes of dopamine over and over again. But again, we as adults, we understand it, but kids don't understand it. Their development, they're not there. Their prefrontal cortex is not developed yet. We'll talk about that. And so having those open conversations on why, and just instead of saying no, will allow them to ask questions and share, and open that dialogue. It only furthers your relationship with them. And I always try to tell kids that come in to see me, I see a lot of teens that like, they think that the phone is a right. Like, this is my property. It's a privilege, right? It's a privilege that you get to carry one. They don't, I mean, unless they're paying for it at 14, which then please send me that kid because I would love to see that kid. However, most of us are paying for our kids' cell phones. And so that it's our right to be able to have those. If we set that up right off the bat, then we can just say that, right? I even say to a kid for their room, yes, that is your private space. And you want your parents to have boundaries and respect that, but it's their house and that's still their property, and that they can enter, you can express your boundary and you can talk about privacy, but it's still their house, right? And so again, that it's a privilege, not a right, even though your kid might feel it's a right. And then Paige will talk a lot about safety issues, but again, remembering talking and explaining that safety issues, the cyberbullying, right? I mean, that is, thankfully I didn't grow up with that, or digital of what I did in high school, but thankfully, the 90s, we had to wait to get our pictures processed, but what they say on the internet impacts someone else. There's somebody else on that side, on the opposite side of that screen, even if you don't know it. And I mean, as adults, we probably need to remember that too, because sometimes we don't say very nice things to each other, or yes, I probably can't. So how to talk the talk. So.
Okay. All right, knowing their access code is important. I understand that for some people, they will say like that's a, violation of privacy, but if you're paying for it, if it's theirs, they're under 18, you are so responsible for that. So that is really important, before giving the phone at all, to know their access code and if it's changed. Discuss how to recognize predatory behaviors. So there's lots of resources that you can get on that too, and looking online at different books that you can read. But there's a lot of, it's not the same. It's obviously changing every year, like the way that predators are showing themselves, and just to be aware of that. and look into that if you don't have social media yourself. That's important. Discuss peer pressure situations that may arise. So Snapchat is definitely under investigation, as probably a lot of you know, for drug dealing. And it's like one of the fastest, easiest ways for kids to get black market drugs. And that's just the truth. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry if that is news. I apologize, but yes.
Yes, so that's something to definitely monitor when they're of a certain age. Discuss how to recognize fraudulent sites, but again, having like a hardware or spyware device for you is really the best way to do that versus putting that responsibility solely on them. Be aware of that app names can be disguised, so like Snapchat and things like that, they can delete them or put them back on is usually the one that I see most, but also they can disguise them as different things. And monitoring software, this will be in your handout, so you don't have to remember these, or you can take a note of it or look it up. Aura, AURA is the top rated, Bark, Family Keeper, and iSi. So those are some really good ones that a lot of people use.
And then most of you probably are that have kids Life 360, right? You can track your kid. That's probably one of the best. So what social media is okay? I am gonna blow you guys away with this, but no social media is recommended. When a kid first gets a phone, right? And everything again, ages for social media depend on responsibility and maturity, right? So if they can show that they're being responsible and mature, then the access to it, right? And obviously, we're going to talk about the potential harms of mental health and why it is, and then the distraction from texting. And if you've ever, well, I deal with a lot of kids, and you guys probably talk to your kids or kids' friends. Kids do not know how to even like make a phone call today. If you can't order something on the internet, they are like, I can't go up and order that from McDonald's, or I can't go to Starbucks. What? No, whoa. And I mean, at 14, I was ordering pizza. So again, those are distractions and limits the communication. So the sooner they get it, the more they're going to be addicted. And that's really one of the reasons why no social media. The earlier the social media is introduced, the more likely a child's going to be addicted to the screen. I mean, I probably could ask how many of you are addicted to your screen. You probably would all raise your hands, and those who didn't are probably lying, and that's okay. And so I think reminding ourselves that I mean, if I leave my phone or my watch, I'm like, I'm naked. I can't go to work. I have to go home. But again, if we are struggling with it, so are kids today. I left the house all the time without a phone or any connection. So today we are so connected that we constantly are checking. And we even have times that you feel like it vibrates in your pocket and you're like, what? And it's nothing, right? So those are actually our brain receptors being stimulated, thinking those are, because we want more dopamine. So we'll talk a little bit about that now. So could these devices cause developmental concern?
Social media and tech is especially harmful for young brains. So our prefrontal cortex, which is, if I ask you what 3 + 3 is, you will say 6, because you have a prefrontal cortex that is, well, I mean, it knew it before it was fully developed probably, but yeah, that's your logical mind, your logical brain is what does all of those tasks for you and allows you to show up and be present in those moments. And that is not developed, and it is basically mush with, you know, young kids. So when we get to the age of 12 to 14, it's starting to grow. They have more autonomy. Maybe they can be trusted. Maybe they're really mature, right? But social media is highly linked to self-esteem issues, anxiety, depression. And we're not saying if they get an Instagram, they're going to get depressed in 30 days. But that dopamine and that rush of the likes, and, you know, we all know this, right? Like everybody in this room understands that at this point, social media has been around long enough to understand that it can be addictive. So that first year, emotional dysregulation can happen if they're too, you know, they're impatient. They have to get on their phone. You can't take it away from them. And it just causes, lack of patience, poor body image, eating disorders. Does anybody relate to that? Like with young kids of any gender that are looking at Instagram and things like that.
And we're inundated with videos on TikTok, on Instagram about everybody like healthy eating, healthy this, healthy that. And obviously everybody has an opinion on that, and not always not everything on the internet is correct. And so kids are easily influenced, like Paige said, their logical brain is not developed. And so their ability to understand that some of that is fabricated or not accurate, they can't distinguish that. And so with that being said, they're more likely to fall trap to, you know, those lovely TikToks where they have those secret rooms and you go into this weird basement that's not really there in the island of this nice kitchen. Well, I don't know anyone who has that. And again, if somebody does, please send them towards me. I'd love to meet them. But again, that is all done with graphics and TikTok, right? And so our brain isn't fully developed until 27. That's a long time. We're talking about kids at 12. They're not even halfway there. And so making sure that we are aware of that and how that impacts our kids and going forward. And then the dopamine rushes, becoming dependent on that, right? Dopamine, right? Instagram is, Reels and TikTok are the best. Those 3 minute, who gets lost on those? I get in bed and I'm like, oh yeah. And then it's like 2 hours later, I'm like, oh crap, right? Where did that time go? I was only on it for three, 4, 6. I don't know. We just keep going, right? Because that dopamine is that fact acting. We up, down. It's the same thing that happens in active addiction. That's the race race to get the dopamine. And so do we know what the ongoing results of all of this dopamine that we are going to be our kids, ourselves? No. Are we going to potentially see more addiction? Possibly. We already see addiction to video games and screen time, but will that change into other addictions? Possibly. I can't say for sure, but my guess is in 15 years, if I'm still standing here, I will be talking a different talk, but it will be about how this has all impacted the addiction and more likely to want that, right? Just like I said, with the phone vibrating in our pants, it's going to want that dopamine and we're going to find it somehow, right? So one of those things, the other part is, I lost my thought, but that's okay. No, you're okay. Is to just be mindful of that. So if your kids are struggling and you are noticing low self-esteem, isolating, not being themselves, school refusal, that's a huge one. If I missed a day, there wasn't much to do except watch a few TV shows. You got Price is Right, maybe a Jerry Springer, all the infomercials in the middle, and then after school programming. Today, kids have the accessibility for so much. Netflix, Disney. Who wouldn't rather stay home and binge watch an entire season of something? That creates that school refusal, right? So it's playing into those other things that we're concerned about. So if you see your kid or refer them we have great treatment providers who can do free assessments to determine if individual counseling, a higher level, what is needed for. And NAMI, right? We have great resources locally here and within DuPage County. And I think that is it. Do you guys have any questions? We tried to rush through so we could answer it.
I read a terrifying article recently. I'll share it with you all as mothers. I think you need to hear about it, but I'm interested clinically if you've seen it as well. Sure. It was about the accessibility of porn to kids.
Yes.
And so we're not talking necessarily about social media addiction.
Yes.
So porn addiction has become way more prevalent for like kids at 10, 11, 12 years.
Yes.
Because they're saying that there's like not restrictions like you would try, like if you tried to buy a pack of cigarettes, they'd be like, show me your ID. But then when kids go to these porn sites, there's no age requirement, and that there's like massive issues with porn. Can you elaborate a little bit about what you've seen in that? Because I feel like that's totally different than TikTok, and it may resonate both with boys and girls in terms of social, like body dysphoria.
Right.
Well, and also what they're trying to target as young as 6. So there's websites that are like Disney princesses, but it's porn, and that's how they get hits and tags. That's what tech is doing. So it's 6 years old that they're starting to target kids.
Yes.
Girls and boys.
Correct. I think the increase of we carry these around, we have the ability to, have more privacy with it, right? So we, instead of like popping a DVD in or, you know, a video, we have, kids can just pull it up. And like, we talked about hiding, the apps or websites under different names. They're very common to do that. But yes, we're seeing a lot of, junior high teens, addicted to porn, males, females included, because of the accessibility. And I mean, you guys have been on some of those like websites, and it's like, what is your or your date of birth? Well, I can make my year of at anything. I can just calculate it. Kids are not unintelligent. They don't have to put in a driver's license. They don't have to do some of those things like to buy a pack of cigarettes. They have to provide that. They just, that's how, you know, cyber, they can get around that, is because they just ask a number. And so, yes, I mean, that is, we see a lot of that, and that is another, I'm glad you brought that up, because we're seeing that significantly in that population, not just gaming, but more porn, and parents not realizing, thinking that they're just watching videos or doing other things. Those headphones are great, but you don't know what your kid is doing, and they can do it in the presence of you on your device, not knowing that they're doing it. So,
And that's where those, you know, conversations are the most important. Like just having the empathy to go back to that age yourself and like, what were you curious about? That's mostly the reason that they're on it. It's not to be bad or to rebel. So never shame the behavior. And that's a whole other discussion we could have here. But those are why those empathic discussions are, you know, and the Bark and Aura will show you those and block those. So that's a big reason people get those.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I forgot earlier is the increase of depression and anxiety happened significantly around the year 2007. Does anyone know what happened in 2007?
Their session.
Nope.
iPad came out?
iPhone, the first iPhone. So iPhone came out 2007, increase of depression among not only teens, but adults too, including suicide rates. Is it Apple's fault? No, but has it impacted us all? For sure. So. Other questions?
You just mentioned a lot about Snapchat and some social media, but YouTube did the wrong thing.
I'm-
I think that needs to be the concept. My opinion, that is super mindful.
Yes, I mean, I think we're what,
I don't know how to socialize that, it's like.
I would say that's the initial social type media, right? Kids love, I mean, if somebody could explain why kids today want to watch other kids play on YouTube, I would love to. And kids don't even, they're like, "Ugh," like they're offended that I even asked. But that is the trend, right? They watch them play on a screen. They're more interested than actually playing. But yes, YouTube. And I mean, you fall into YouTube, they have an algorithm, and all of a sudden you're into the black hole of YouTube. So yes, and they will just stick things in, like Paige had said, they're targeting younger, so then they're interested in it. You click something and then you're on to another trend or algorithm. So
YouTube Kids, like my kids have watched
That-
YouTube Kids, and I thought they were watching like a Disney princess thing, and it was like.
Nope.
Not.
Yeah.
no,
And that's why the screen time too, you know, just monitoring that, making sure it's, you know, it's an amount that you also have to, I forgot a big part, neurodivergency. So, ASD, ADHD, OCD, these are all different, mental health disorders that can result in obsessive thinking. And so that dopamine is going to hit their pleasure center of their brain differently than it would a neurotypical kid. And there are a lot of neurodivergent kids. So just being open about that with them. You might have one kid, unfortunately, it just sometimes isn't the same, right? And you do have to make those tough decisions. And, you know, that's where the empathic conversations come in.
I just think, like we talked about a lot with in my friend group about phones and getting into our kids, and I was 10. And you know, some of my friends are like, well, hopefully it won't be such a big deal as they're like, this is just their movement. And you know, 'cause my husband and I are like, no phone, you know, whatever. But that's not the case, right? Like it's just have you seen it where, I guess they're saying that it's just gonna become such a normal thing, they're gonna get bored with it and not, we still. focused on it.
Not with
I don't-
technology,
the
that's big,
case, but,
yeah.
like, I don't.
So I'm gonna ask a question. How many of you check Facebook every day? And how, I would say some of you probably have had Facebook or Instagram, right? Or any, that, right? We haven't got bored with it yet. And so kids, their dopamine, and so then when it's conditioned, then it becomes part of our routine, right? So do I think it's gonna get its lesson? No, we actually get more reliant on phones than we are getting less reliant, right? I talked about technology. We're not looking at how to incorporate technology into things. We're looking on how to incorporate these things into technology, right? Education into technology, communication into technology, healthcare into technology, right? We are doing all of this, it's not the other way, right? And so, no, I don't think it's gonna go, it's gonna get better. We're gonna get conditioned to need that, right? I mean, who uses Amazon? I mean, Amazon Prime, 2 day, COVID hit and we were mad that 2 day shipping. I mean, this is the stuff we're not getting, it's not getting better. And as adults, we are also preoccupied. And so if we're sitting on their phone, it's really hard to tell your kid not to be on your phone. So having no screen times are really important. At the dinner table and following that. It's really hard if you're telling them do as I say, not as I do. As much as I love that saying, if we don't do it and do the same thing, we expect they're not gonna believe or want to do those either.
Yeah, you wanna mirror the behavior that you wanna see, so.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so like with the latest like AI technology coming out, like have you been hearing anything in terms to relate to that?
So the questions about AI technology, the people on the screen, just so they know. And I think, that's a whole nother, I mean, I could be here for hours. I think that's gonna be, that's really gonna hit the most in school systems. They've worked so hard to try to help not with like plagiarism and all of that. I'll tell you, the AI it's crazy. I had a client, teen who we sat in the same time, did the same question, and the answers came completely different at the same time. What was mirrored to like how I talk versus how my 18-year-old client, like that's scary. So if all of us did it, we'd all get a different response, which means how can they track any of that? How is that? I mean, that is.
But even like outside of like the plagiarism, are you starting to hear any other like ways that it's kind of intertwining into like what you were going to talk about, like social media wise, or any new areas? I'm just curious, like if you don't hear anything yet.
I mean, mostly for school wise, right? And I mean, kids will find any way to find the easiest way, right? I mean, we think of that as laziness, but really that's ingenious. Those are going to be the kids who change the world because they're finding the easiest, fastest way to get something done. They're looking outside of the box, right? Those kids who fit in the box, we need those kids. Those are the rule followers, but those kids who think outside, try to find the easiest way, are going to be those kids who push boundaries. However, not enough because it's still so new. And I think, I can't really.
Watch it 50 minutes during the Sunday.
Oh my God.
They talk about it. Great.
It's. Mhm.
I was gonna say, one of the features of AI that's terrifying is like, it keeps popping up as like, would you like AI to write your therapy notes, like as a therapist? And I'm like, well, no, I would not like that because it learns my voice or I tell it how to be my voice. So the thing that's kind of scary is like, I heard a presentation from a detective talking about all the side chat rooms and everything and how to privately get a kid, cut them from the herd in a way. And so they could be sounding like they're another kid based on like input into an AI.
Yes.
So then they're chatting like I'm another 16-year-old kid or I'm another 12-year-old kid because I have the lingo down because that's what I wanted it to sound like because I typed it in and I put that filter on, like if that makes sense. So that's where I see it being really terrifying. Like the old school AIM. I didn't really know who I was talking to. It was probably some old creepy dude. And like
For
my
sure.
parents didn't know about that. And so like stuff like that is
Right.
really scary because I think the side chat rooms is where we're gonna be more nervous about it. With the AI being utilized and plagiarism, like there's so much stuff,
Right, and I
so
think
much stuff.
that is one of the scary, I have had multiple clients who have fallen into this fear that they have shared some kind of inappropriate picture. My guess is they had, and that somebody on the other side had it and they were gonna share it to school. I mean, we heard about one in Naperville and it resulted in a death by suicide. However, these kids are paying these people that they don't know because they think it's another teen in their school. And so even though they might not, or they think they've been hacked or somebody has given them a picture and they can't remember what they've done, that AI is gonna play into that. I mean, Snapchat has an AI, and I'm not gonna lie, I used it to help find the title for our presentation. So if Snapchat has an AI, everything is going to change to AI. Other questions?
I just have a question. What's the best way to convey to a young person the magnitude of a digital footprint? You know, like I'll give you an example. My daughter during COVID, they all had iPads. They were communicating with their friends via iPad because that was the only method of communication. And through the school email, she sent something and I had to pull the Dorinda, write it, regret it, say it, forget it. Like, what is the best way to explain to kids that what they put out there could be out there for the rest of their lives, you know, at a young age?
I mean, one way like I talked about earlier is like our own experience with it, right? My 12-year-old experience of what I wrote, like, I don't want that to be what is represented to me I'm not that same 28-year-old anymore. And so obviously you don't want them to share everything you've done, but showing some of that allows them to see the magnitude of it, that it still follows and it will pop up over and over and everything is searchable. But having that conversation, and I think we have to be mindful that kids don't realize that I can call somebody else and someone else can be recording that on that other lot on the other side. So nothing is ever private anymore. And that's really hard for them to understand that, but once they fall trap to that, then it's easy. We don't want them to fall trap, but having those conversations and just bringing up those situations and asking them how would they feel or what they know. Because let me tell you, every kid loves to tell you what they know, and you can learn most from your kids. I learn most from my teenage clients. They'll tell me exactly what I need to know because they're the experts. They're dealing with it every day and they know what the current lingo, current things. And if you take, instead of like giving today, so this is, I'm the best advice I can give you is most kids today are very different. When I was a kid, I went to my friends for support, right? I went to my friends, I could get validation, I could get support. Kids can't go to friends today. They go to their friends, they're like, please don't trauma dump on me, please, trigger warning. They can't, they go to their friends for solutions. I went to my parents for those solutions. I didn't go to my parents to be like, you did a good job. I went to my friends for that. I went to my parents for solutions. Now kids are going to you guys for validation. And when they come home and they've had a really crappy day and we go with, have you tried this? What about this? That's not what they're looking for. They're going to come back and you're not listening to me. You don't understand me. That your kids, your partner, if they continue to respond the same way and tell you the same thing over, they're eliciting a different response. And so you can ask them, like, what do you need from me? And having that, or what do you want, or what can I do, is going to help that, right? Having that open, instead of going with a solution or what you should have done, telling them that really, having that empathetic listening ear and active listening and saying, that must have been a really hard day. What can I do? What do you like, what would make you feel better today? Not that they should get a reward, but it could be like, I just need 10 minutes to myself, or having that, and then you can do that. So then having those open dialogues, they'll be more likely to listen to you if you're not always telling them this is why, or because I said so, right? If you have an open dialogue, they're more likely to listen to what you're saying, right? I could have told you, and they're still gonna be the kids, and they're still gonna be like, my parents know nothing. They were never my age, and we all were, and it's not much different except all of these additional stressors. But we said the same thing to our parents, and so having that, or allowing them, finding out who are supportive people, it might not necessarily be you, but like, it could be an aunt, it could be, like an old babysitter who is now not like closer in age, things like that, looking to figure out who they'll relate to and who they'll talk to about it. But I don't think anybody is gonna understand that digital footprint until they're on the other side of it. And unfortunately, that's because their brain's not fully developed.
I like to explain it in a simple way with the digital footprint though, and an analogy with kids, because kids only think about 24 hours in advance. So even when they're 16, right, we don't want to be like, here's in 10 years what your digital, I mean, none of us thought that way. And it's less now. They're so much smarter in a lot of other ways, and I'm not, but there's other things that, that they need to compensate for. I just use the analogy of a scar. So if you have a little one somewhere, it might not be as noticeable, and people make mistakes. But if you have a big scar, that you can never get rid of, that's the outcome. And just understanding that from like a physical standpoint too helps them right size it. They can't right size that 20 years later. Like, oh no, I might not be able to get a job because of this thing. I mean, they're not even going to think about that because that's not how their brains work. So keeping it simple is important.
Yes.
Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And that's where the empathy comes in, right? But hopefully they'll be less likely to, to bow down to the pressure if they understand that real consequence.
Some of what you're talking about makes me think of back to the monitoring, the social media, the cell phones. And so when you're the parents and you happen on something that maybe you wish you never saw on that device, when is there that line of validating versus when, if at all, is there the place to intervene or to help problem solve, depending on what you come across when you are monitoring?
Well,
That's like a whole other.
so how to determine when, like, how to bring something up you found on social media as monitoring? I guess I'd have a lot of follow-up questions, but we're not having a therapy session right now, but it would depend on what it is, right? I think being honest and like sharing and if you're doing it in front of them, then they'll see it, right? You'll be like, oh, okay, what's going on with this? Or, what was meant by that? Because sometimes, kids, they change the name of everything, and I'm not sure why, but they have words that mean other words. But being able to just be open and ask, and then if you see some like depressing, or I would just ask them how are you feeling, and ask if there's any, like, I saw this, is this how you really feel? And kind of just open that dialogue and ask open-ended questions, right? Allow them to have the space and not necessarily go into a reactive, which we all want to, right? Like, oh my gosh, my kid, but being able to, and then assess, like, getting them into an intervention. If your kid is struggling with that, the best thing is to seek a counselor or a therapist, right? They're going to be able to, and everyone can benefit from a therapist. I would say every good therapist has their own therapist. So with that being said, I encourage a lot of parents in that preteen, even if a kid doesn't necessarily have full-on mental health diagnoses, they can benefit from regular counseling to talk and express and learn how to emotionally regulate and how to talk about the things that they might not. I didn't want to talk to my parents about certain things, and talking to my peers, we got a lot of misinformation. Looking on the internet, same thing. However, having a reliable, or having that is a positive. I can't say there's a right way, but being open and honest and just allowing that dialogue in a situation. And if they shut down, give them that space to have that time and then come back to it.
Yeah, if it's pornography too, that you're seeing, then, or if it's something inappropriate, that's a really good time to just say, what are you curious about? Like, and here is the results of, like, this is not what, sex really is. Like if they're 10 or 11 and they're looking at that, that's a whole different discussion. But there's nothing to be shamed for. I have young ones that I've seen in my office and their parents have called me before and said, I saw this on so-and-so's Chromebook, right? Before there was way more, to help with that. I got that all the time. It's really not a big deal, but it can be damaging. So we have to just approach it with just being casual, being curious and having that open discussion and then making, changes to how you're monitoring and the programs that you use. But it's a really common discussion that we have in therapy offices all the time.
Right, and if we go at a shame base, right, then there's something wrong with me, right? Like
Yeah,
at 10 or 8, right? Like we might be curious about boobs and type in boobs. And if we did, lots of things would come up, right? Not always good things. However, we might be interested in when we're gonna have them, or as a boy, like we're starting to have interests in the opposite sex or other people. And so they might be curious and fall into things, and that increases the curiosity even more, and it just kind of opens. We're all curious humans. And so if we shame and we go from a shame base, then there's something wrong with us, right? And as a kid, kids don't understand that. So then we're defective, and that creates those core beliefs that can turn into those really negative thinking patterns and depression and anxiety, right? And so then we start shaming, and then other behaviors can come up.
charge the phone at night. That's also helpful. It's a simple putting the phone away too,
In a location that I'll be honest, most kids, like, you go to bed, some of them stay up later than we do. But if having it in a location that's closer to you, where they'd have to come into your room, not that you want all the phones in your room, but where it's in a central or a place that as they get older, that's more of a problem. At 10, they're not as likely staying up as late as you. So, other questions?
All right. Cutting you all off. There's so many questions I'm sure that we all have. Thank you so much to Ellie Mental Health for coming out. And we're gonna share this whole presentation. I'm sorry that it couldn't be projected up here. And also a one pager of information that I'm sure you're gonna want to be reading immediately. Apps to be using, and also Grit2, which is kind of partnering right now with them, is doing a fundraiser on November 9th. So I'll be sharing that. It's also on the juniors page. It's a happy hour at one of the board members' houses. So it's a come get to know Grit2, learn more about mental health opportunities in the community here in Downers Grove. What are we doing? What do you want us to be doing? Things like that. And we're gonna have a really great raffle basket, actually. So even if you can't make it, you can get raffle tickets. You don't have to be present to win. And one of those amazing candles is gonna be in there. And lots of other people actually got back to me with cool items. So the raffle basket might be like the highlight of the evening now. So this basket's getting pretty big. So please let me know if you have any questions about that, or if you have questions, the information, how to get a hold of them as well will be sent out to you after our meeting tonight. So thank you so much for allowing us to join the meeting tonight.